everyone, this is Noah, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about technique demonstrations and explanations, especially when looking at the more esoteric methods of karate such as tuidi and chibudi. Recently, this video was shared on social media, and it got my attention because of the way the technique was demonstrated and explained. Now, this isn't something that's unusual in the world of karate, and it's not something that's new, but you can see the instructor demonstrate the technique very quickly and forcefully on a partner that is just standing there waiting for the technique to be demonstrated. He's not offering any sort of resistance. He's not even really trying to protect his arm from the attack that's going to be demonstrated. He's simply holding it out there to be used. And when the technique is applied, he drops to the ground in a lot of pain. This is something that isn't necessary when teaching, in my opinion. You can demonstrate the effectiveness of a technique without putting your partner at so much risk for injury. This technique can fairly easily cause a lot of damage to the connective tissue in the wrist or even break the bones of the wrist. And you shouldn't be applying it so quickly at all unless you actually need to, especially if you're just teaching it. Now, in addition to the way he applied the technique, the instructor in this case explained that the technique worked by using his breath and putting energy into the arm. Now, breath is an important component to martial arts, and energy, at least as far as movement and strength go, is also important. But you can't use these to explain away the biomechanics of a technique. And when we're looking at a technique such as a joint lock, it's very important for students to understand how the technique actually works on a mechanical level. If we just say, oh, I apply my breath at this moment and I put energy into the arm, we aren't actually explaining how the technique works. We aren't explaining the directions of movement that need to be incorporated in the technique. We don't explain the points of contact necessary. We don't explain how this is related to what the opponent is trying to do. If you look at a technique from another system that does joint locks, such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you aren't going to see such vague explanations of how a technique functions. You are going to get a very simplistic and fundamental explanation of why a technique works the way it does. So if we're looking at ourselves and how we teach techniques, it's important to understand that teaching in this way and trying to keep things mystical and trying to sort of make it seem more effective than it is, we're not going to be able to be taken seriously from martial artists outside of these circles. They're going to look at what's being taught and say, well, clearly you don't understand the technique because you can't explain it. And additionally, if you're trying to explain something to a group of people in a seminar, it's important that you teach it effectively and you explain how the technique works. You could be an extremely skilled and knowledgeable instructor, but if you don't actually pass on the knowledge of how something functions on a mechanical level, on a physical level, then the people who are learning it from you, even if they are able to do it correctly, they won't be able to effectively teach it when they take it back and work on it in their school, because they won't have the underlying knowledge of how it works. This is something that really hampers karate's effectiveness, and it hampers your own effectiveness as an instructor. If you can't teach how a technique works, then it's not something you should be teaching.